Syracuse football adds to its wide receiver depth.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, on today's show, we are talking about the latest transfer portal addition at wide receiver for Syracuse football, and that is Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina. I'm going to give you guys a little bio of him, a little scouting report, where he currently fits in the lineup. And of course, we are going to talk about the current wide receiver room for Syracuse football right now. And guys, it's a pretty deep unit that we are going to talk about, which is why also later on in the podcast, we are going to discuss whether or not Syracuse football is done adding at wide receiver this offseason. So all that and more here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. And before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. First of all, hope everyone enjoyed their Christmas yesterday, and still happy holidays to you all. It's still Hanukkah. We got New Year's coming up soon. So hopefully everyone is enjoying their holidays right now. I've been a little bit behind on this episode, okay, because it was earlier this week where Syracuse football made this transfer portal addition. Tyshawn Russell, a wide receiver from South Carolina, transferred over to Syracuse. He is 5'11", 195 pounds, and he's got 3 years of college eligibility remaining. I like the fact that Tyshawn Russell has 3 years of college eligibility because he's got plenty of time to develop. That is very, very important. Russell, he was a 3-star wide receiver back in high school. He is from Pennsylvania, but he actually didn't play wide receiver up until his senior year. He was a defensive back, I believe, before that. So this is someone who is still learning the position, let alone what it's like to play in college football. This is one of those low-risk, high-reward type transfer portal additions in Tyshawn Russell. He did play as a true freshman. In fact, he played 10 games as a true freshman in 2023, where he had 5 total catches for over 80 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, last year, I don't think he played in a single game, hence why he still has 3 years of college eligibility remaining. Tyshawn Russell is the second wide receiver that the Orange have added in the transfer portal. Both of them figure to be depth options. The other one that I am referring to is Chris Long from Rutgers. It's always nice taking from Rutgers. Now, I find it interesting that Long is higher rated in the transfer portal than a guy like Russell, because here's my thing with that. I like Russell a lot more, and here's why. Long has proven more in the Division I college football level. He has been in college since 2020 at Rutgers the entire time, but he has been nothing more than a depth option at Rutgers. His career high was like 200 yards back in 2022. It's not that much. Now, we have seen wide receivers blossom later on in their college careers. I mean, the biggest example is literally Jackson Meeks this past season, but Jackson Meeks was coming from Georgia. Chris Long is coming from Rutgers. I'm not trying to downplay the addition, but I just find it curious that he's higher rated than a guy like Russell, who we don't know what his ceiling yet is. We don't know Tyshawn Russell's ceiling. It could be really high. It could be nothing more than just a depth option, and that's likely what it's going to be. But with Chris Long, I think we know that he's probably just going to be a depth option. We'll discuss later on where both of them fit in the wide receiver room. But overall, with Tyshawn Russell and Chris Long, both of them are just depth guys. I don't think either of them right now on the roster are top 6 wide receivers. Could be wrong. Easily, we could see what happens in the spring and into fall camp. But as of right now, both those additions are really nothing more than just depth guys for now. I do like Russell, though, with 3 years of eligibility over Long, who's got 1 year of eligibility. As far as a scouting report on Tyshawn Russell, there's not much out there on him, even from his high school, because you have to be a higher rated recruit in high school to really get a full in-depth scouting report from like 24/7 Sports or On3. So I couldn't gather too much. But what from I could gather, which is from the South Carolina website, Tyshawn Russell is someone with a lot of speed, which is nice. So he could potentially be a burner. Now they're all fast in college, but when they're fast, that's when you can become a burner. He's also someone that could potentially return kicks for the Orange next season. I could very easily see that happening. Trevor Pena is back for the Orange, but if they want to kind of keep him off his feet on special teams, kind of limit him a little bit in his role for next season, maybe a guy like Tyshawn Russell can return kicks for the Orange next year. Russell had one kick return. It was back in 2023, and it went for 12 yards for what it's worth. So it's not like he has a ton of experience in kick returning, but I could easily see that being his role next season. And who knows, maybe he does eventually blossom and become a starting caliber wide receiver. I wouldn't put those expectations on him. I would think it's a little bit unfair. He is a depth guy. In fact, both receivers the Orange have added in the portal this offseason have been depth options. So that's Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina. He committed to the Orange just a few days ago. He signed with them. It is official. He's only got 5 career catches at South Carolina, but he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining, which means this is a low risk, high reward type move. Because you know what? If Tyshawn Russell, if he doesn't really pan out, then it wasn't like you were expecting him to really pan out. But if he does pan out, then it's, wow. Remember back on December 26th, or when I recorded this podcast on December 26th, but remember a few days before that when they actually signed him, little did we know that he would become, the number 1 wide receiver in Syracuse football. That's all I'm saying, right? So overall, that's Tyshawn Russell. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. We are going over the Orange's latest transfer portal addition at the wide receiver position. We just talked about Tyshawn Russell. Now, coming up, we are going to talk about the wide receiver room as is and where the 2 transfer portal additions so far this offseason fit into that. That's coming up and more here on Locked On Syracuse. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. And guys, let's talk about college football for a second. Syracuse football is playing in the bowl game tomorrow in the Holiday Bowl against Washington State. They are 16.5-point favorites. The line has moved by like 10 points with all the opt-outs and the transfers of Washington State. You want to get in on the action? Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. On today's show, we are going over Tyshawn Russell, the South Carolina transfer wide receiver who has 3 years of college eligibility remaining. And like I said, you know what that means? Low risk, high reward for Syracuse football. And folks, if you like what you're hearing, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. It helps the channel reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Now on this segment, we are going to talk about the current wide receiver room after the Orange have made 2 transfer additions at wide receiver. So I think there is a clear top 6 in the unit, and we're going to get to that in just a second. As of right now, I don't think either of the transfer portal additions that the Orange have made, Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina and Chris Long from Rutgers, go into that top 6. They go into that next tier of depth guys, okay? Let's start off with the big name. The number 1 wide receiver on the Orange next season, technically on the depth chart, he will be listed as wide receiver 3, but it's for a reason. Trevor Pena is coming back, according to Fran Brown. He announced it at the club dart party. I believe it was last week. So that's pretty cool. Pena, the reason why he's the number 1 wide receiver, but he'll be listed as the wide receiver 3, is because he is the starting slot receiver for the Orange. The slot receiver is denoted as the wide receiver 3 on a team, because the 1 and the 2 are the outside guys. Pena is the inside guy in the slot. He's the third guy, but he's technically the number one wide receiver. If that got too confusing for you, I'm sorry about that. He's going to get a lot of targets next year. Trevor Pena had a career season with 79 catches, which led the ACC, over 870 yards and 7 touchdowns. He is another example of a guy who blossomed late in his college career. Trevor Pena has been with the Orange forever. I mean, I think it's at least since 2020. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was on the team in 2020 that went 1-10. We don't really speak of that year. It was a bad year of Syracuse football. It was my freshman year at Syracuse too. Ugh, not fun at all. Not a really warm introduction to Syracuse, but he was on that team. So he has seen the highs of this season and the lows of 2020. He's a veteran wide receiver. He is returning as the starting slot guy. Huge for the Orange. Okay. Obviously, I don't think there was really anyone in the portal that the Orange could get that was better than Trevor Pena. Huge that they got him back. You also got Darrell Gill. I really like Darrell Gill. He's got eligibility remaining. He's entering his third year in college. He had over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns this season. He took a big jump from 2023 to 2024. And Darrell Gill was not super duper high on the depth chart. He was someone where when he got an opportunity, he made the most of it. His career game was against UConn. It was like 9 for 185 in that one. It was a big one. I like Darrell Gill. And on December 26th at 12:34 p.m. Eastern, when I'm recording this, he's someone who I would eye right now as a potential breakout candidate for next season. So that's Darrell Gill. You got Justice Ross Simmons in the mix as well, the Colorado State transfer from last year. He had 2 touchdowns in that comeback win over Virginia Tech. I really like him. It's just that he was supposed to be a big-time threat for the Orange this past season, but he dealt with a nagging hamstring injury, and with all the depth at wide receiver from this past year, he got leapfrogged. So we didn't get as many opportunities as we would have liked, but for next season, he still figures to be in that top 6 group of wide receivers. You also got Amari Hatcher, who's supposed to come back right now. He's a veteran deep threat wide receiver who had nearly 500 yards in 2023. Zeed Haynes. Zeed Haynes is another intriguing option at wide receiver for the Orange. He was supposed to be the wide receiver 1. He was a 4-star recruit in high school in 2023. He redshirted at Georgia that first season. He transfers over to the Orange. He had a good first couple of games for Syracuse, but then dealt with personal issues, matters, whatever you want to call it. I don't mean to call him out or anything like that. It's just trying to provide the facts to you all. I don't know where he's going to slot in the receiver depth chart heading into next year, but he was supposed to be the wide receiver 1, and he was for the first couple of games, but then he wasn't playing anymore after that. And I don't know how much of an advantage or disadvantage that's going to be come spring ball and fall camp. But as of right now, would I slot him in the top 6? I absolutely would. And you also got Emmanuel Ross, who was a 4-star recruit in 2024. He has appeared in 4 games so far this season, but I got good news for you all. And a subscriber of mine, he brought this to my attention, so shout out to him. I don't remember your name, but just know I'm shouting you out here. He pointed out that the bowl game does not count towards eligibility, and I fact-checked that, and it's true. So Emmanuel Ross is someone who I would love to see tomorrow play a lot because I want to know what we have in a guy like Emmanuel Ross. He's a very interesting guy, as I have said before on the podcast. He's a big body wide receiver, could be a red zone threat for this team. But throughout the season, they had him listed as the backup slot receiver to Trevor Pena. A profile of big body, red zone threat does not make sense as a slot receiver. Slot receivers are like Trevor Pena, maybe the greatest slot receiver of all time. It's Wes Welker, a Julian Edelman, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're not the biggest guys in the world, but they are just quick, they're twitchy, and they know how to get open. That's what you got to be like as a slot receiver. So maybe that's really what Emmanuel Ross is. Maybe. But when I had Brian Smith on, the Locked On recruiting expert who watched him in high school, he said he's more of an outside threat, deep red zone guy. Having said that, I would still so far put him in that top 6 group of wide receivers. And then you got the transfers. You got Chris Long from Rutgers and Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina. It's a deep group. It is. I don't think any of us can deny that. I really like this wide receiver unit that Syracuse football has. Now, look, it's going to be hard to replace a guy like Jackson Meeks. It'll be hard. He might go over 1,000 yards tomorrow in the bowl game. I think he needs less than 100 to do it. There's no Oronde Gadsden, but Oronde Gadsden wasn't a wide receiver, so I didn't have him listed there. The good news with a guy like Oronde Gadsden is they have a 4-star recruit in Jamie Tremble waiting in the wings, a 4-star tight end. So this is a blue chip guy who kind of profiles like Oronde Gadsden. He's more of a pass catching tight end. I would love to see him again tomorrow. I want to see a lot of the young guys tomorrow. It doesn't blow a game of eligibility. Why not? This is your time to play him. This is it, right? Get some game action in. So I'd love to see that. Overall, wide receiver unit, I think, is one of the deeper units on the team. And the two transfer portal additions that they have made, Tyshawn Russell and Chris Long, they only add to the depth of it. I don't think either right now crack that top 6 that I just mentioned. Leave a comment in the comment section below more wide receivers that you want to look out for Syracuse football this upcoming season. Now, coming up, are the Orange done adding at wide receiver? That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. It's the holiday season, everyone, and what better way by spending the holiday season by attending some live basketball games. The Christmas games yesterday were actually really exciting, and whether it's the NBA, college, like going to Syracuse, basketball games, they're always typically exciting, like I said. And the way I get tickets for games is by using Gametime. Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And my favorite feature is the curated deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Is Syracuse football done adding at outside wide receiver in the transfer portal? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. Folks, I think it boils down to this. I think if the right opportunity presents itself, the Orange will look into adding another outside wide receiver in the transfer portal. But as of right now, I think they are pretty good at the position. Let's go back to what I was talking about right before the transfer portal officially opened earlier this month. And we were talking about some of the needs that the Orange had with their roster this upcoming season. I mentioned outside wide receiver as kinda a need, and I would still put it in that same category. Like, you could use one. Syracuse football could absolutely use another proven outside wide receiver, but they don't necessarily need it. Jackson Meeks, he's out of college eligibility. He was the number 1 outside wide receiver for most of this season, had a really, really big year, and he could hit 1,000 yards tomorrow in the bowl game. He needs less than 100, I want to say. And ultimately, if the NCAA puts in that 5-for-5 rule, it's possible that Jackson Meeks could come back with eligibility. But as of right now, I would not make that assumption that he's going to be back. So they could still sort of use an outside wide receiver, but due to other pressing needs, I think it ultimately comes down to if the right opportunity presents itself, the Orange will then look to see if they can add another receiver. If you look at their current receivers and you look at what they've added in the portal, they've added 2 guys who are mostly depth guys for now. Chris Long Jr. from Rutgers, a veteran depth guy. Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina, a guy who low risk, high reward due to having 3 years of eligibility remaining, but both are depth guys. And I just talked about the top 6 receivers. There are plenty of guys in that top 6 that could have big years, that could have breakout years. And you only need maybe one of them to have a big breakout season, to have a really, really good receiver unit. You already got Trevor Pena you can pencil in to have a big year again. You also got, Justice Ross Simmons, Zeke Haynes, Daryl Gill. These are guys who could be breakout guys. Umari Hatcher is a steady deep threat. I think we kind of know what he is at this point of his college career. Emmanuel Ross, we'll see what his role is going to be next season, and maybe he has a big spring or big bowl game tomorrow, and that changes everything. Overall, if the right opportunity presents itself, that's when I could see the Orange looking to strike, because right now they need to focus on other needs. They need to focus on their offensive line. Now, Diego Pavia's ruling with the NCAA now giving guys who played in JUCO an extra year of eligibility, it could really help Syracuse with retaining a lot of their linemen. John Ray Reed, Jacob Bradford, Mark Petrie, those were all guys at the beginning of the offseason. I said they got no more eligibility, but it's college sports. Things can change on a dime. All of a sudden, I think they do have eligibility remaining because of Diego Pavia's ruling in that JUCO essentially does not count towards NIL. Therefore, college athletes should still be able to come back regardless of if they played in JUCO for a year, because it deprives them of NIL. So if you can get at least two of those three back, John Ray Reed, Jacob Bradford, Mark Petrie, then offensive line does not really become much of an issue for Syracuse football next season. And they already got N'Keal Bretrand, so it's not much of a problem. But if they don't get him back, and that's something they got to figure out as a program, then offensive line still probably remains the number one need on the team. You also got corner. I am very surprised that the Orange have not been more aggressive in attacking the cornerback spot. Maybe they like what they have, but they've lost their top three corners. There's no more Clarence Lewis. He's out of eligibility, and he can't even get the JUCO ruling because he played at Notre Dame. You got Jaden Bellamy, who's in the portal. Marcellus Barnes is in the portal. Technically, those two can return, but I wouldn't put money on that at all. So Syracuse's solution right now is Davian Kerr. And I like Davian Kerr. Nothing against him, but that's going to be your number one corner heading into next season. Are you sure? You positive? I think ultimately two things can be true. You can believe that at some point you need your young players to play. And that's kind of what I've been saying at wide receiver, where I would not mind if they added another outside wide receiver if he's proven, but at the same time, they have enough breakout candidates to where I could easily see them saying, no, we don't need to add a wide receiver. With corner, you can believe that a guy like Davian Kerr, maybe he should be in a number two corner next season or be a starting corner next season, but also that they need to add a veteran corner that can start games in the portal. You can believe both. I think both can be true with the cornerback room. I'm surprised that they have not been more aggressive in that. You also got inside linebacker. That's a big need. That is far more pressing than wide receiver, because so far next year, James Hurd and Derek McDonald are your two inside linebackers. The two inside linebackers at the end of this season became Marlo Wax and Justin Barron. Folks, that's a downgrade. Going from Justin Barron and Marlo Wax to Derek McDonald and James Hurd. So they did add Fran Brown Jr., Fran Brown's son, in the portal. I didn't make a podcast on it, but just to let you know, they did add another inside linebacker. But I've been also surprised they haven't been more aggressive in that as well. So overall, wide receiver, it's definitely on the back burner of needs. So I don't know, or I would guess that Syracuse might be done. They might, if the right opportunity presents itself, sure, but they can be done and they'll be fine in the unit next season. Leave a comment in the comments section below what you would do if you were Syracuse football in the portal going forward. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, tonight, we got Poll Friday on Thursday. How many quarters is Kyle McCord going to play in the bowl game tomorrow? The reason why I asked the question is because the bowl game is the perfect opportunity to see what you got in your young guys. And who knows, sometimes they can have such a big game, it changes your outlook for the following season. That literally happened with LaQuint Allen. He played in that Pinstripe Bowl against Minnesota, had a terrific game, and lo and behold, he was the starting running back in 2023, starting running back in 2024, and perhaps the starting running back in 2025. So bowl games definitely matter for young guys, which is why I say, how many quarters do you even want to play Kyle McCord? Perhaps we can get a look at Jakari Williams and he has a big half. And we all kind of get excited about what Syracuse has in the quarterback room next season. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I think at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, one more Syracuse football game in 2024. They play Washington State in the Holiday Bowl at 8 p.m. Eastern. There will be a full post-game reaction podcast for the final time in 2024. And then on Saturday, Syracuse basketball. They are playing Bucknell at 2 p.m. Eastern, the final non-conference game of the season. There will also be a full post-game reaction podcast to that. So stick around here on Locked On Syracuse for all of that coming up and more on the channel. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. You can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you liked this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And I will see you all again later tonight.